American universities are being bought up and controlled and influenced by our allies and our adversaries, but they should be run by Americans and for Americans. So what are we going to do about it? I'm Gideon Askowitz, and this is 7-Minute Expert. So in terms of the Qataris, what exactly have they been getting up to? Well, first we have to understand Qatar and their position. Qataris like to occupy this middleman position, so they're quite friendly with the Iranians, but they're also not super friendly with everyone. They're more properly be viewed as a strategic ally, as a partner, but they're not really a true ally in the sense of the word that you might think when you think of Britain or France in terms of countries that actually share our values. Something that you need to understand about the Qataris is they are Wahhabis, a radical group of Islam that you will find. Actually, the Vice Grad has done a great video on covering, so I'm going to show you a clip of that now.
Country with a very clear agenda. Qatar's game plan: push Wahhabism, a strict, ultra-conservative branch of Islam, while positioning itself as the leader of the Sunni Muslim world. They've been tied to terror groups like Al-Qaeda since 2003 at least. US emails leaked in 2016 accused Qatar of funding ISIL, and Trump called them out in 2017 for supporting terrorism.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
And Al Jazeera? It's part of that machine.
Okay, so what you saw from that video is that the Wahhabism of the Qataris is quite radical. They're associated with Hamas. They're a primary funder of Hamas. In fact, they actually, the main leaders of Hamas live in Qatar. So actually, we'll take a look at a video. So in that video, you're going to see the leaders of Hamas actually watching October 7th on TVs that are being broadcasted on Al Jazeera, the state-funded news outlet of the Qatari government, and they're watching it with pride inside of Doha, inside of Qatar. So that's the Qataris, and what they're doing is essentially they're using their influence through media companies like Al Jazeera, and then they're pouring their money into American universities, and those things feed on each other. The Qataris spent several $100 million in Northwestern. Why? Northwestern is one of the most prestigious universities and has one of the best schools for journalism in the country. So what does Qatar do? They purposely open up a program after spending hundreds of millions of dollars in Northwestern, and they open up a journalism program in Qatar. So students who come from Northwestern go to Qatar, and they work in journalism in Qatar for what organization? Al Jazeera, that same organization that we just saw was embedded with Hamas. They are manipulating our universities and spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And a lot of this goes undetected. And over the course of the past couple of years, as the Department of Education has gotten a little bit more strict on these issues, we've begun to uncover an absurd amount of money that Qatar has been pushing. But it's not just Qatar. The CCP will do is that they'll send money in smaller installations, and they'll even send it to high schools. Actually, the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh covered a story from, I think, over a year ago now, where the CCP bought up the blueprints for a high school, a tech high school, one of the best in the country, and they bought their curriculum, and they did this by spending about $3 million in a non-for-profit that they established in the school, and then in exchange, they bought the entire schools, basically their blueprints and their curriculum, and then they created 30 such schools in China. And that's obviously a serious issue because the CCP had access to the school records, to the students' records of the projects that they worked on, and many of the students from military families. And that's a serious issue, obviously. That's a national security concern. And that's one aspect of the CCP's game. And this is even getting into all of the land that they've been buying up near military installations. But the CCP is obviously not a friendly force within the United States, and certainly, obviously, our primary strategic adversary. So what they've been doing also, they've been pouring billions of dollars into education, into buying up programs and putting in institutes in different universities. And then they create exchange programs and partnerships with the universities. For example, there was a program with a university in Georgia, and that program actually ended up getting investigated by Congress. They just launched an investigation in 2024 because they realized that this is a program that has congressional funding because they have a DoD, Department of Defense contract, where they do a lot of research for our military. Except that same university then made a deal with the Chinese and did a lot of that research in China. And obviously that research that was happening in China was at a university that was, and like all things in China, controlled by the CCP, our main adversary. So what we've seen is all of these different countries are using their money and pouring them into the United States in different fashions, and a lot of it's pretty nefarious. So what has Congress done? So Congress could have acted, and they tried to act. In 2023, Congress passed what was called the Deterrent Act, and this is actually something that I worked on very closely with different members of Congress and different committees. I remember actually meeting with at the time Chairwoman Fox. She was the chairwoman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, and we were speaking about the Deterrent Act and how to get it passed through the Senate because it had passed the House at that time, and we were basically stuck. And a lot of that was because far left-wing Senate Democrats actually was passed in the House with 31 Democrats signing on to the bill. It was a bipartisan bill. It's not exactly a controversial bill. The act essentially made it a requirement for schools to be transparent when they get money from foreign sources. They were very strict on specific countries of concern, the DPRK, which is North Korea, the China, and Russia and Iran. Those countries had stricter concerns, and then other countries had more leeway in terms of the amount of money that they could donate, but at a certain threshold, it would be picked up. Now, I wasn't necessarily overly thrilled at that threshold. I want to see that threshold be brought down, and hopeful that maybe it will. But what we basically saw was a move by Congress, a bipartisan move to begin to track this issue of foreign funding so we can see just what the hell is going on, because most of this funding has gone undetected for a long time. And as the DOE has increased their restrictions and their disclosure requirements, we've seen and uncovered a lot more funding. So this was basically clamping down on that issue. And what we were hoping to see in 2023 with the Deterrent Act was to see just what was going on. But then when the bill got to the Senate, Bernie Sanders and a bunch of far left senators basically tried tanking the bill. And even though there was enough Senate Democrat support for the bill at the time, Chuck Schumer didn't move it forward because he was afraid of causing a rift in the party during an election cycle. So that's a serious issue. And what we're looking at now, though, is that bill died, and now we have an opportunity to pass a stronger and better bill. So that's something that I'm trying to work on, and I hope that you guys will all join me in working on, that we need to clamp down on foreign funding in education. It's not right that other countries and foreign adversaries, even if they're allies, the Qataris are an ally. Many countries have serious programs in the United States, and that's all fine and good, but we should know where the hell the money is coming from and where it's going, what it's for. There's absolutely no reason why the American people do not deserve to know if there are foreign governments spending hundreds of millions of dollars and pouring them into our universities and affecting the next generation of leaders. It makes no sense. So unless you like the CCP and you want them to buy up the American universities and influence our country, we need to act, and we need to act now. So I hope that you'll join me in calling on Congress to work on passing a new version of the Deterrent Act, one that's stronger and better and more expansive and protects American interests. Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Minute Expert.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.